It's okay not to be okay, but I promise I'm trying. By rayrae118. Chapter 8. Redo. Amelia stared. She blinked once. Twice. Finally, she turned back to Harry. Well, that's one way of getting in touch with him. Harry grinned and Sirius let out a bark of laughter. Amelia stood up from her seat and hesitantly stepped forward until she was standing in front of the man she had known a long time ago. She hoped there was still some of that man inside the hardened survivor she currently saw. She searched his expression, looking for something. She seemed to find it because she smiled, the years melting away as she leaned forward and grasped the man in a tight hug. Sirius gripped her back just as tightly. "Leah," he whispered. Amelia felt her eyes moisten as she heard the nickname he had come up with so many years ago. He had been the only one to ever use it, and it had become so special to her. They had never been anything other than co-workers and friends. But she couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if things had gone differently. She wondered if she could have tamed the playboy, given enough time. She sniffed slightly and let go, stepping back and winning the tears away. She smiled. "You're looking pretty good, Siri," she said, giving him an assessing gaze. Harry watched the interaction with confusion. That hug seemed to last slightly longer than was socially acceptable for two people, even if they were friends. Which, apparently, they were. Sirius returned the smile. This meeting was definitely going better than he could have hoped. Minerva watched the meeting with interest. She remembered hearing about his incessant flirting with the already established Aura, when he and James had just been starting out at the DMLE. James had found it rather amusing, but she had just been waiting for Amelia to put him in his place. She remembered the Hufflepuff as a down-to-earth, no-nonsense woman, and had expected her to put an end to the flighty ladies' man. She had been surprised to learn that Amelia was giving it right back, though it did make her wonder what might happen between those two. Of course, Sirius's incarceration had put an end to any kind of relationship the two might have pursued. Everyone sat back down. Amelia made a point to get right down to business. She was used to locking up her emotions, and told herself there would be plenty of time to talk after she got him a fair trial. Sirius was more than willing to tell her what had happened almost 13 years ago. Though he did get a bit choked up, talking about the death of his best friends. Amelia nodded, taking notes and listening intently. There was an ache in her chest, listening to his distress. When he paused out the description of what had happened during his confrontation with Pettigrew, she looked back up. "Do you know how he managed to escape?" Sirius looked down briefly. When he met Amelia's gaze once more, he was comforted by the compassion he found there. No matter what, he knew that his relationship, convoluted as it had been, had not changed with the stern former Hufflepuff. He nodded, grimacing slightly. "We were all unregistered animagi. We figured out how to do it in our 5th year. James was a stag." He looked over at Harry here, remembering his godson's rather impressive Patronus. "I'm a dog, and Peter's form is a rat. Rather fitting, don't you think?" Amelia could only nod. It impressed her hell that 3 students had been able to accomplish such an amazing feat of magic at such a young age. Coming back to her senses, she queried somewhat rhetorically, "So I can assume that the mystery of how you escaped Azkaban has been solved?" What she really wanted to ask was how he had managed to stay sane for 12 years, but she felt that might be a bit insensitive. Sirius nodded sheepishly. "Dementors can't sense animal emotions. When Fudge left me his paper last summer, I saw Peter sitting on a boy's shoulder on the front page, and I just knew
I had to get out of there. He was at Hogwarts. With Harry.
He smiled at his godson, an expression that was immediately returned.
I was skinny enough as a dog that I could slip through the bars. I swam back to shore and started making my way north.
Amelia nodded in understanding, internally wincing at the idea that he could be skinny enough to slip through prison bars. She bit her lip, looking down slightly. Not for nothing, though, had Sirius spent so much time studying the object of his affection all those years ago. And it seemed he could still read her quite well. His voice grew contemplative, his gaze far off, as he spoke quietly.
I knew I was innocent. It wasn't a happy thought, so the Dementors couldn't take it away. It was more of an obsession, but it kept me sane. I could remember who I was. So, when I saw that photo, I knew why it was important. It lit a fire inside me, and I was able to escape.
Amelia nodded again, relieved that underneath it all, Sirius was still Sirius. Older, more careworn, more, well, serious. But she could see the spark of life in his eyes, the fire and passion, and the mischievousness that had drawn her to him all those years ago. She smiled, much more relaxed, making all three of the castle's current inhabitants breathe quiet sighs in relief. She pulled out a few vials from her bag. In order to corroborate your story, I will need to take some memories from you. Would you be willing? Sirius nodded immediately, and Amelia turned to Harry, who had remained quiet until now, looking pensive. I would also like to view the memory of your meeting at the end of term. Harry looked over at his godfather, and on receiving his nod, turned back to Amelia. Anything that will help, he agreed. Amelia smiled at him compassionately, and they wasted no more time. She collected Sirius's memories of his conversation with Peter and the Potters, where they decided to switch keepers, and his memory of finding James and Lily dead. She wanted nothing more than to give him a hug, seeing his distress, but held herself back until he finished. And finally, his recollection of confronting Peter and watching him escape, unable to do anything. Next, she concentrated on Harry, and after explaining how to extract a memory, she watched as he pulled out a long, silvery strand. He deposited it into the vial, looking a little uncertain. Amelia capped the vial, before inviting him to voice his worries. Harry bit his lip.
I only put the meeting until when the minister came to the hospital wing. Do you need to know how Sirius escaped, too?
Amelia looked at the trio in front of her. She had a feeling she might not like the answer she would receive. Minerva looked as confused as she felt, but Sirius also looked rather grim. She turned back to Harry. Why don't you tell me what happened, and I'll decide if I need the memory? His distress intensified, so Amelia clarified. I promise, whatever I hear, I won't take action unless it's absolutely necessary. If you murdered someone, I can make no guarantees. She was pleased that her little quip at the end brought a small smile to the young wizard's face. Harry believed her, so he began to speak of the rather hard-to-believe tale, starting from waking up in the infirmary, telling the minister of what happened, only to not be believed, or even listened to at all, and finally using Hermione's time-turner to go back and not only rescue Sirius, but Hagrid's hippogriff as well. When he finished talking, Amelia nodded. I don't think that's something anyone needs to know, she informed them, much to their relief. She spent a few moments carefully packing up the vials in her bag, then stood up. Sirius, Minerva, and Harry were quick to follow. I will start the proceedings immediately, but you understand that Fudge will not be agreeable to the idea of a trial. It looks bad for him, you see. They all nodded, keeping their thoughts on the incompetent moron to themselves. I will let you know any developments as soon as they occur. Hopefully, We can get this settled before the end of the summer. They all nodded, and Amelia offered her hand to Minerva and Harry before steeling herself to face Sirius. He had no compunctions about grasping her in another hug, trying to pass along his continued feelings towards her. Stepping back, he thought he was successful when she gave him a watery smile, before turning back to Minerva. Is it all right if I come and visit from time to time, even if I don't have any updates? Minerva looked from between the pair of them and smiled. Of course, she agreed. You are welcome any time. Amelia nodded, a little worried to know that a wanted fugitive was staying with the boy who lived, and a woman she respected completely, even if she knew he was innocent. The blowback, should it be discovered, could be catastrophic. On the other hand, she knew Minerva wouldn't have invited him into her home if she hadn't had contingencies in place. McGonagall Castle had been around for a long time, much longer than the Bones estate, and she knew the wards would be enough to protect them. Once Amelia had left, the inhabitants of the castle were somewhat uncertain of how to act. Minerva glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner and realised that it was past lunchtime. A call to Tibby informed her that the meal was ready whenever they were. Over lunch, the trio discussed their plans for the summer. Sirius was eager to relax and spend some time recovering from his ordeal. Poppy had sent over potions regime for him as well. Hopefully, by the time a trial was scheduled, he would no longer look like a skeleton with skin. Harry was eager to try out the Quidditch pitch, though Minerva slightly dampened the mood by asking him about his summer homework. Harry looked down, ashamed. Uncle Vernon locked up my trunk as soon as we got back from King's Cross. I was able to read the textbooks for arithmancy and ancient runes, but only because I owl-ordered them from Flourish and Blotts the next day. Sirius let out a low growl, and Minerva looked likely to start hissing before she collected herself. Well, you will have no such excuse here. In fact, she set down her napkin and turned to give her new charge her full attention. Now that this arrangement has become official, I feel we should start to set out some ground rules. Harry nodded, a little confused and slightly afraid. He knew that neither she nor Sirius would ever raise a hand to him, but still, he couldn't help the bubble of fear that rose up, before he ruthlessly squashed it back down. No! Aunt Minerva's rules would be nothing like Uncle Vernon's. Minerva smiled, taking some of the sternness out of her gaze. Rule number 1. I want you to spend at least an hour every day on your schoolwork, whether it is reading your textbooks or working on summer essays. Sirius let out a short laugh, and Harry couldn't help but smile at the obvious rule. Living with a professor would definitely take some getting used to, especially when he remembered having to sneak his textbooks out of his locked-up trunk the previous summer, having to do his schoolwork in the middle of the night. Rule number 2, Minerva continued. You are to do your best, in every way. I don't expect you to be perfect, but you owe it to yourself to be the best you can be. And that includes at school, she said with a stern look that told him without a doubt that she knew he had been deliberately underperforming in his classes. Harry gulped and nodded. Minerva's expression softened, and he understood that she probably knew his reasons as well. The last rule, Minerva concluded, is that you need to ask any questions. If you are unsure of something, you need to come to us. We cannot help if we don't know what's wrong. Are these rules clear to you? Harry nodded, eyes still a little wide. Oh, yes. This arrangement would definitely take some getting used to. Minerva rested a hand on his arm. I know it's a lot to take in, Harry. We'll just take it one day at a time. All right? Harry nodded again, and Minerva removed her hand, feeling his tensing muscles at the unplanned touch, and squashing down her anger at the reasons behind it. The first thing we need to do is go on a shopping trip, she informed them, with a sniff at Harry's loosely fitting wardrobe. Harry looked down, embarrassed. But Minerva just shook her head. I'm not blaming you, Harry. But as you are my charge, it falls to me to correct this grievous mistake. Harry started to protest her buying him anything, but Minerva overrode him. I am your guardian now, Mr. Potter. It is my responsibility to take care of you. We will replace your wardrobe, and perhaps we can do something about the bare walls of your room. You live here now, and I want you to feel at home. Harry felt the heat rise to his cheeks, even as he recognized the pleasure of having someone take care of him for a change. In one day, Aunt Minerva had made him feel more at home than he had felt in almost 13 years with the Dursleys. It was a heady and depressing thought. When she saw no more signs of protest, Minerva concentrated on Sirius. She looked him over for a moment before nodding. A few glamours should allow you to come with us, she said. You are also in need of a few things as well. My brother's clothes are better than what you had, but you are much skinnier and slightly taller. She glared at the space between the hem of his pants he was wearing and his shoes. It was maybe an inch of bare skin, but she looked at it as if it had done her a personal offence. Looking back at the faces of the two men, she shook her head as she saw their amusement, but chose not to comment, mostly because it was the first time she had really seen Harry look anything other than careworn or afraid in a while. I believe we might be better off in the Muggle world first, she decided. Will that be a problem? Both Sirius and Harry shook their heads. Harry, after all, had grown up there and knew how to act. Sirius had spent a good deal of time with Lily, becoming comfortable in that world. She had said that someday his survival might depend on knowing how to act amongst non-magicals, and insisted he learn. Minerva nodded. Good. She stood up. I expect you both are ready to leave in half an hour. With that, she left the dining room, ostensibly to prepare herself for their shopping trip. Harry and Sirius looked at each other, a little unnerved to see the head of Gryffindor behaving so motherly. With a sigh, Sirius also stood up. Come on, Pop. Let's go get ready. Harry nodded, following his godfather up the stairs before disappearing into his bedroom. He looked through his clothes for a moment, before deciding that the clothes he was currently wearing were about as good as it was going to get. He looked around the room for a few minutes. The walls were a natural beige colour, and devoid of anything decorative. There was a desk set in the corner, stocked with parchment, quills, and ink. The bed was a comfortable full size, with plain sheets and a grey comforter. There was a mirror set in the opposite corner from the desk, and a dresser next to the window that showed a wonderful view of the Quidditch pitch. Harry made a mental note that he would need to get a bookshelf. He had hidden his love of reading for a long time, but now that he had the opportunity, he wanted to showcase his books. There were also 2 doors he had yet to explore. One showed a rather large closet, completely empty for the time being, though, if he had judged the gleam in Aunt Minerva's eyes correctly, it would not remain that way for long. Harry was surprised when the second door showed him his own bathroom. It, too, was rather bare. Harry moved his toiletries from his trunk to the bathroom, though he thought they would be better going into the trash. His toothbrush was starting to look rather worn. A knock on his bedroom door reminded him of the time, and he immediately left to join his godfather in hurrying back down the stairs to join the 3rd member of their strange little family. Shopping with Minerva was a strange experience. Before leaving the castle, she had done some tricky wand work, and now Harry walked beside a blonde-haired, brown-eyed Sirius. He had trimmed his hair and beard, and so looked nothing like any of the pictures of him circulating. They would still need to be vigilant, but Harry wasn't too worried, especially in the Muggle world. Minerva and Sirius apparated Harry to an alley near their destination. Once Harry had regained his footing, they led him out onto the street and into the store they had in mind. Harry's jaw dropped as he was led into Harrods. His eyes grew wide as he saw the designer clothes, and once more tried to protest. Minerva and Sirius steered him into a quiet corner for a moment, where they once more informed him that it was their duty to look after him. When he tried to protest the cost, Minerva just shook her head. "Harry, the McGonagalls are an old and wealthy family. I have no family left, and so have no one to spend the family fortune on. You are more than worth it." Sirius put in his 2 canats. "The Blacks, too, are a wealthy pure-blood family. I haven't been able to get to Gringotts to officially become the head of the family yet, but once I do, I plan to do my level best to spoil you rotten." "Minerva's right, Harry. You're worth it. Think of it as 12 years of missed birthday and Christmas presents." Harry looked at him. "I thought that's what the firebolt was for," he asked, though he knew he was grinning as he said it, and both adults knew they had won. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this one. I like this. It's starting to get happier. Harry's eating well. Minerva's rules are basically the opposite of the Dursleys. And they're getting ready to go on the shopping trip. Next chapter is one of my favourites. Next chapter is one of my favourites in this. It's so much fun. I like it when my characters get spoiled and Harry's earned every penny. As they said, he's worth it. Because you're worth it. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.